The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia, the streaming TV service dedicated to exploring the cutting edge of metaphysics, ancient wisdom, and the unexplained. 5,000 years of wisdom on demand. Get your first month for only 99 cents. Visit Gaia.com/Jim. That's Gaia.com/Jim to see what's happening on the largest consciousness media streaming platform in the world. Thanks, Gaia. The Paranormal Podcast is also brought to you by the Campfire Cruise. Join me in the summer of 2018 on a cruise to the Bahamas full of ghost stories, a live campfire show recording, and a lot more fun. Get the details at campfirecruise.com. That is campfirecruise.com. Check it out today. And thanks, Holiday Maker Travel.
This is the Paranormal Podcast with Jim Harold.
Welcome to the Paranormal Podcast. I am Jim Harold and so glad to be with you once again. And we have a great show today. Janet Boyer is going to join us. We are going to talk about tarot and how we can affect our life by using tarot. And Janet's going to share that with us. And then in a very interesting interview, we're going to talk to Judika Illes about occult detectives. And we'll get right to that right after this.
iPhone and iPad users, help us keep the Paranormal Podcast at the top of the charts. Go into your Apple Podcasts app right now and hit subscribe. We appreciate it. Now on to the show.
Well, today we have a repeat guest, and it's been a while, and I'm so glad that we have her back. I'm talking about Janet Boyer, and when we have Janet on the show, of course, the topic is tarot because she is a master of it. And today she's going to talk about her new ebook, Affecting Reality with Tarot Cards. And it's a great time for it because we're in the beginning of the year, and I know that we all probably want to make a lot of changes and improvements. And Jan's going to tell us how to do that with tarot. Now, this is not her first rodeo. She is the author of Back in Time Tarot and Tarot in Reverse, as well as the co-creator with her husband, artist Ron Boyer, of the Snowland deck and brand new Coffee Tarot. With their teen son, Noah, Janet created the Boyer Charming Oracle and Animal Totems Charm Oracle. Her third traditionally published book, Naked Tarot, Sassy Stripped Down Advice, releases into the wild from Dodonna Books in September on the 28th. As a respected, trusted Hall of Fame Vine reviewer on Amazon, there's only 148 of them. I did not know that. She's penned over 1,200 reviews, and her articles have been featured in print magazines like Ancient American Magazine, Witches and Pagans, and Sedona Journal of Emergence. Her newest creations are the 2018 Tarot Journal, A Minor Arcana Journey, and the ebook that we just talked about, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards. You can visit her online at janetboyer.com, but right now we're going to talk to her in person. How are you today, Janet? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jim. It's so great to be with you again.
I'm exhausted, all those things that you've done. My goodness, you spend a lot of time with the tarot.
Oh, dear Lord, I know. I keep threatening that I'm going to retire, and I can't. I just keep finding cool things that I could do with tarot cards, and I keep sucking my husband in to do art for another deck, and we already have 2 decks. We just finished the Coffee Tarot. It was on Kickstarter. It was a big success last summer. We were fully funded within 24 hours.
Wow.
And it's the first and only tarot deck dedicated to coffee, all things coffee. So it's really cool because the major arcanas are all done in like brown coffee tones. Like our version of the Chariot card is Fuel, and it shows this huge percolator taking off like a rocket at Cape Canaveral.
Love it.
and all these people are holding up like coffee mugs, like, yay, it's a success. And so it's funny because I keep roping him in and say, hey, we could do this or we could do that. And so, yeah, it's just never ending. And I'm under contract for my 4th tarot book. So I'm going to be working on that and the companion to the Coffee Tarot deck. I'm working on that as well. So I'm always writing, always creating, and it tends to be related to tarot.
Well, it's very neat. And when you have something, I find this with what I do, when you have something that you're excited about and you love and you enjoy the ideas. Just sometimes it's almost like too many ideas. I find it's like, well, I could do this, I could do that, but certainly you've been a great success with tarot. Now, as we go into a new year, we're recording this in the second week of January 2018. A lot of us think about resolutions, but sometimes it's more like, well, I'm going to do this, but really there's no roadmap to get there. How can tarot help us with that? How can tarot put us into action? What can tarot do when we're looking at things like resolutions or goals for the coming year?
That's a great question. I actually differentiate between resolutions and intentions. Resolutions tend to be very absolute. They're almost like a command, and they require a lot of willpower and self-discipline. And there's not a lot of wiggle room with resolutions. For example, I will go to the gym 5 days a week. There's no wiggle room to that. You either meet it or you don't. Intentions, on the other hand, are holistic, and they incorporate several or many ways to reach an objective. So let's say you want to increase movement in your life, get more exercise. Well, then you can say, I increase my movement every day. And that could be, then you have lots of ways that you can manifest that goal. You could do dancing, walking, yoga, hiking, stretching, biking, playing with your kids. And so, with resolutions, there tends to be a negative spiral of shame and guilt when we don't, make our goals, because resolutions are kind of like a fixed bar to reach. You either reach it or you don't. And interestingly, in 2016, there was this huge research project, and they found out that 90% of people break New Year's resolutions within days or weeks in January. 90%. That's a huge chunk. That was more than I expected. But, intentions are more like course corrections, or like a seedling that needs nurtured. They say airline pilots are off course most of the time. And so it's basically, they don't go in a straight line. It's basically a series of minor course corrections. And so that's how I see intentions. It's a conscious intention to enhance certain things in your life, to bring well-being, to create, be a co-creator with God or life or the universe, whatever you want to call it. Because co-creation is not passive. You can't just sit around and expect your life to improve or expect to bring things into your life without being a conscious participant, And the reason why I feel tarot cards used consciously can help that is because they're like little mini maps. They cover things like relationships and thoughts and passions, and it also covers some of the challenging things that we go through in life. And so tarot cards are like these portable vision boards. I don't know if you've ever heard of vision boards. They were really popular, especially around 10 years ago or so. And it's where you get poster boards and old magazines, and you cut out pictures of what you want your reality to be, or what you would like to bring more in your life, and different words and text, and you glue it on this vision board and you look at it every day. Tarot cards are a lot like that, especially if you get what's called an illustrated deck. And illustrated means that the minor arcana, the cards from ace to 10, the number cards, actually show people or figures doing things in them. It's not just like a poker deck where, have 3 diamonds or 3 coins or 5 hearts or 5 cups. It actually will show, let's say, someone who is crying over spilled milk, so to speak, focusing on 3 cups that are overturned as opposed to the 2 that are filled. And so as long as you're using any kind of illustrated miner's deck, like a Rider-Waite-Smith, or even our Snowland deck has illustrated minor arcana, you can use any of those as little mini maps. And you could even technically don't even need a deck, because if you get my ebook Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards, I actually include images for every card. And so a person could even focus on that every day, or they can even go to images.google.com and find a certain image that goes with whatever they're wanting to achieve or enhance, and they can print it out and they can put it in their wallet, their briefcase, a magnet on the refrigerator, put it in a frame, stick it, on their desk, what have you. And then every day, just focus on that image or images. It could be more than one card, and, increase more of what you want. It was so funny that you said, when you love what you do, sometimes you have so many ideas and it's hard to focus. I'm laughing to myself because I actually have an anecdote about that.
Tell us.
newest ebook, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards. I have this personality. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and what have you. Well, in the Enneagram, I'm type 7. In Myers-Briggs, I'm ENFP. I'm what Margaret Liebenstein calls a Renaissance personality, where you have all these ideas and you just have a hard time picking what to do next. And I put in my ebook how the other day I was whining that I couldn't focus on what to do next, that I felt I was overwhelmed by all the options available to me. And in the tarot, this is represented by the Seven of Cups card. It's kind of like a key phrase I use even with my husband or fellow tarotists. It's like, yeah, Seven of Cups, man. Meaning it shows a person who's kind of looking at these clouds, and there's 7 cups floating, and each cup has something different in it, and they're almost like, okay, what do I choose? And that's a lot of my personality. You know, I have tons of ideas and so many options that I could do. And I felt stuck. You know, it was almost like an analysis paralysis type of thing. And the funny thing is, I was in the process of writing this ebook, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards. And I said, girl, you need to practice what you preach. And so I intended clarity, and I felt attracted to the Ace of Swords. Now, this is a card of mental clarity, decisiveness, and single-mindedness. So, you know, I took the card out of the deck, and I placed it before me on the dining room table, and took several deep breaths. Deep breathing really helps when you're focusing and intending. And I focused on clarity, and I kept saying to myself, one thing at a time. And I kept saying clarity. And I repeated it several times, and wouldn't you know, my mind stopped racing, and I intuitively knew the most important thing I could do at that moment. So in just a few minutes, my mind went from a tangled ball of yarn to a single thread of clarity. And so then I followed the thread, did what needed to be done, and then went on to the next thing. So this intention stuff really works, and I'm still holding on to the Ace of Swords because I have that companion book to the Coffee Tarot to write, and my fourth traditionally published tarot book that I'm under contract for. So the Ace of Swords is like really prominent in my life right now, and every day I think about the Ace of Swords, or I think about the mental ace card from our Snowland deck, which shows a hand reaching out of the cloud, which is a huge icicle. And it's funny because I'm reminded we've had such cold temperatures here in Pennsylvania. Right. And so there's these huge icicles, you know, hanging over the awnings of our porch. And every time I see it, it reminds me of the Ace of Swords or the Ace of Icicles, which is to be pointed and clear and have mental focus, which is what I need sometimes to actually sit down and, you know, work on a specific project. And so I use it myself, you know, daily, the conscious intention, and I find it just really works wonders, and it enhances things. It makes you more conscious, because consciousness is central in shaping our world. You know, as goes our thoughts, our attitudes, and our vibrations, so goes the world. And so I'm a really big believer in daily intentions, you know, whether it's for the big things like you want to do for the new year, but it also could be, you know, what we would consider smaller things. And I believe that everything is vibration, you know, how quantum physics talks about vibration, and I believe the higher we vibrate, you know, the better our increased well-being. And higher vibrational states of emotions are things like joy, peace, gratitude, contentment, hope, optimism, magnanimity, curiosity, creativity, purpose, enthusiasm, and feelings like that. But another thing I do say in my book, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards, is I caution that I don't believe these people who say that affirmations or intentions will give you a life that is free from challenges, because I believe that we incarnated here on Earth to experience duality, light and shadow. I mean, Deepak Chopra even said, you know, there cannot be any creation without light and dark together. And so I believe that pain is a part of our script, everyone's script, but I think suffering is optional. And I think a lot of our suffering is caused by incorrect assumptions, negativity, cynicism, assuming things won't get better, perhaps assuming the worst of a situation or of a person, expectations. And so tarot is used consciously, you know, it can be a really cool tool into drawing more of what we want in our life and less of what we don't.
And it's just my opinion, and I've often felt this way, and I can understand how people get down and so forth. I've been down plenty of times, and one day I'll come in and I'm like raring to go, and the next day I'm like, so-and-so's not working, or, you know, if personal things happen, you're like, why me? I mean, I think everybody kind of has that internal pity party sometimes. I think we're all impacted by this. But to me, taking action is really important. Doing something to get what you want, not just kind of wishing for it, but taking action. Sounds like the tarot is one way that you can, in a way, take action, correct?
Well, absolutely. Because if you're actually taking the time to evaluate your life and say, okay, what do I want more of? You're already taking action. You're already the head of the game, ahead of most people who just kind of live their life through zombies with their heads in their devices. So just by asking yourself, what do I want more of in my life? And then starting to write those things down, like, do I want more peace? Do I want more solitude? Do I want more excitement? Do I want more purpose? Just by writing those things down, you're already taking action. But then you could go a step further using tarot cards or, other tools that will help you with your intentions, which could be oracle cards. It could be positive quotes. It could be beautiful images. It could even be songs, journaling. And then you say, okay, how can I go about increasing that in my life? And the thing about tarot cards is, well, there's so many beautiful ones out there, and they're colorful and they're illustrated, and you can literally pick one according to any of your styles or desires or preferences. And then you can pick and say, okay, I want more peace in my life. So you look amongst the tarot and decide for you what card looks like is the most peaceful. Or you can look, consult my book, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards, and look through and see which one, the I say is more, for promoting peace or excitement or passion or curiosity or learning or studying or whatever, you want to draw into your life. And then you can use that as a focus. And by literally keeping that image before you every day and saying a little affirmation, like I kept saying, clarity, with the Ace of Swords, you are literally affecting the quantum field. You're literally changing your reality with your thoughts by doing this, what appears to be a small act. And affirmations help too. I also have an ebook called Affirmations with the Tarot, and I literally have 20 affirmations for every tarot card. So that's a really good supplement to my new ebook, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards. But yeah, that in itself is action, to sit there and say, okay, what do I want? What do I want to draw more of? And then take the steps to just gently increase it in your life, to invite it. Like I said, it's like an airplane with course correction. If you mess up, and let's say your goal is to be more compassionate and kind, and you find yourself being short-tempered with the store clerk, and you kind of beat yourself up for it. Okay, well, don't go into a negative spiral, with negative self-talk saying I'm a bad person or what have you. You just say, you know what, I'm going to do better. Say a little prayer for the person and then do better next time. And then keep focusing on, let's say, the Ace of Cups, which is a card that promotes compassion and positive feelings. But you could even, use a picture of a heart or a picture of a dove or whatever you want. I mean, you don't have to use tarot cards, but tarot is so perfect for it because they are literally like I said, little mini maps, little vision boards, because they tell a story and they show a scene. And so that itself is action. But then, of course, you could actually go further action. But it all starts with your thoughts and adjusting how you think, your expectations, your attitudes. And the more you do that, the more you realize, oh, my God, I really am a co-creator with reality, and I really am affecting my life. And it doesn't prevent, of course, like I said, challenges or inequity or, financial loss or what have you. But it will help you deal with the cards life deals you better because you'll have clarity, you'll have poise, and, you can make better decisions when you're in that state rather than when you're panicked or cynical. So, yeah, it all starts with thoughts. Thoughts are powerful, and they've done studies on this with plants. There was this researcher that was doing studies with plants, and he had a match, and he lit a match right beside a plant, and the plants were hooked up to, I don't know if they were EKGs or some kind of machine that would detect any electrical spikes.
Yeah, I think it might have been EEGs, but I know what the studies you're talking about. I think it was back in the 70s, maybe.
Right. And they've done other ones since then. But yes, and the plant spiked and acted like it was screaming. But then later on, a bunch of researchers came back into the room, and whenever the one that had the match got next to the plants, then, the screaming, was recorded as if it remembered who held the match. But then they even have done studies where people who thought of lighting a match near a plant would record a spike. Okay, so that is really spooky, and that's really cool and shows about quantum mechanics and how our thoughts actually affect reality. And if our thoughts affect plants, how much more does it affect our fellow humans and the world at large by our attitudes and the vibes we send out and, just how we see the world?
So it's interesting because I think many times tarot is thought of as kind of like, let's say, a receiver. In other words, it can receive information and give you information about your situation, your future, those kind of things. But you're saying in this case, tarot can almost act like a transmitter and transmit out to the universe these intentions and help them happen.
That is brilliant. I am writing that down and totally stealing that transmitter. That's fantastic. Yes, I never thought of it that way. Exactly. You're exactly right. See, I'm not a fortune teller type of tarot reader. Even I still do professional tarot readings, and I do that for people, but I'm always the type of person that's more like a fortune creator rather than a fortune teller. So I show people once I do the readings how can they can then take the cards and the information and then take action in their life. And absolutely. Oh, I love that, Jim. Transmitter, yes, exactly. You can use the cards themselves to transmit signals of what you want in life and attract more of it. And I think that is one of the hidden powers of the tarot that has not been explored. And that's why I keep getting excited about tarot, because that's kind of the frontier I'm entering into about the conscious creation. I mean, I've always been of that persuasion when I do my tarot readings and write my books. I'm always about empowerment, not, giving a man a fish so he can eat for the day, but rather teaching him how to fish so he can eat for a lifetime. But yeah, absolutely. Tarot cards can be used by anyone without any knowledge of the cards, no experience, and you can use them to draw more of what you want in your life. Absolutely.
Well, after this, we're going to talk more about the tarot and affecting your reality with Janet Boyer. After this. The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia, the streaming TV service dedicated to exploring the cutting edge of metaphysics, ancient wisdom, and the unexplained. And keep listening, because I'm going to tell you how you can get your first month of tremendous streaming of the topics we love for only 99 cents. Now, we all know those big name streaming services with movies and TV series and general entertainment. But until Gaia, there wasn't a streaming service dedicated to the topics we love. But thanks to Gaia, there is. Now, you can watch Gaia on all of your devices. There's Roku, there's Apple TV, your iPhone, iPad, Chromecast, Android device, Fire TV, your computer. Basically, if you're listening to this podcast, you can watch Gaia. Now, there's a lot of video on the internet, but, Mom said if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And that's the Gaia's difference, because Gaia means quality. Gaia creates, they curate, they bring you the best in 40 topics on video. They explore the topics we love, and they're always providing viewers with tremendous new content. And this week is no exception. For example, if you were a member of Gaia, you could watch Wisdom Teachings, The Storms of Saturn. Unprecedented planet-wide disturbances around Saturn are so dramatic that they could redefine everything we thought we knew about the solar system. From gigantic storms to strange dust voids, we are seeing the effects of hyperdimensional energy being redirected as physical phenomena and massive energy releases. Or maybe you want to tune into Cosmic Disclosure, Hybrid Creatures and Secret Bases. On that show, Emery Smith brings forward his information concerning the formation of underground bases and secret programs creating strange hybrid creatures. Or maybe Regina Meredith's Open Minds program, a logical approach to the afterlife, featuring probably the most famous person ever in afterlife research, Dr. Raymond Moody. Of course, the great author of Life After Life. Dr. Raymond Moody is in pursuit of a rational understanding of near-death experiences in the afterlife. He has developed new rules of logic which may finally yield a means of conceptualizing these ineffable experiences of life after life. And there is so much more. Just so much great content. And there's a page now where you can sample a bit of it for free. Gaia worked with me just for you guys to set this up. And you can watch some shows for free to get a flavor for it. And I actually picked some from different categories I thought you might like. So go over to Gaia.com/Jim. That's Gaia.com/Jim. Really, there's nothing like it. It's like a video buffet for the topics we love. So go to Gaia.com/Jim. And once you've watched those videos, absolutely free, no obligation, and you say, yeah, Jim is right about this, click on the little button that says sign up. And you'll have some different options there. And you might want to try the one where you get the first month for only 99 cents. And there's some other great offers there too. But if you just want to dip a toe into the water, you can sign up for only 99 cents for your first month. And I think that Gaia is great. They've been a great supporter of the show. So when you go and you sign up for 99 cents, not only you're getting access to a tremendous catalog of original and curated video content, but you're also saying thank you to Gaia for supporting this show, and their support has been so important. Go to Gaia.com/Jim to see what's happening on the largest consciousness media streaming platform in the world. Thanks, Gaia.
Bringing you the strange since 2005, we return to the OG of paranormal podcasting himself, Jim Harold.
We're back on the Paranormal Podcast. Our guest is Janet Boyer. The subject is tarot, specifically Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards. She has a new book, Affecting Reality with Tarot Cards. I think that be very interesting for you if you want to check into it, by all means. Now, Janet, I want to kind of actually go back a little bit, and maybe to someone who's not heard one of our previous conversations about the tarot. I think there's a lot of conceptions about the tarot, and some people think, oh, those are evil, or they're spooky, or they're tapping into dark energies and those kind of things. And when you look at things like the death card, or people maybe get a misconception about it. Can you maybe allay those fears a little bit for people who are maybe intimidated or frightened of the cards as being an evil type thing?
Absolutely. In fact, I actually went to college to be a Christian minister, and I was an ordained Pentecostal minister and a co-pastor for 7 years. My first husband and I were pastors. After 7 years, he died of leukemia. But that is actually my training, is in Christian theology. And if you looked at the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, which is the most popular tarot deck, there's tons of Christian iconography in it. And so I think how it got the reputation of being, quote, evil is that people in the church called it evil because they considered it fortune-telling. And so they threw the baby out with the bathwater, equating it to Ouija, like something like a Ouija deck, which is absolutely not the same thing. And so people just, have taken what they've been taught and what they've heard preachers said it's evil, and they've assumed that without even doing any investigation. And it's a shame, because there's so much wisdom, universal wisdom and archetypes within the 78 cards, which is called the tarot. The tarot consists of the 22 major arcana, which are very recognizable, and you mentioned one of them, the death card. And the death is just, a part of life, and it signifies the passing of one state into transitioning into another, a bit like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, or when we go to the other side, we pass on. People a lot of times get nervous about the devil card because it shows a horned creature with these huge wings, and these two humans are chained to a block and their tails are on fire. And it does look, rather scary, but it doesn't represent an actual devil. What it represents is bondage and chains, those things that enslave us as humans, whether it's materialism or addictions, belief systems that are self-defeating, obsessions. So that's what the devil card is. So people a lot of times see the image and they get weirded out and assume it's evil, when it's actually just a symbolic representation of what the archetype is. Because if you think about it, the devil is a very good symbol of the shadow self, or being enslaved in addiction. In our Snowland deck, we call that card Chains, and we show these two puppies that have chains on them, and they're outside and it's all snowy, and it's anytime you're tethered to something that has control over you. So the tarot is absolutely not evil. All they are is paper and images. And now there's over 1,000 or more, probably thousands of tarot decks on the market. So you can get something as benign as, Gummy Bear Tarot, or, a colleague of mine has a new deck called the Kitty Cats Tarot that's all cats in the Rider-Waite tradition. Our Snowland deck is 100% kid-friendly, that takes some of the scarier images and makes them very kid-friendly. Like the Tower card we call Removal in our Snowland deck, and it shows a teenager who is using a snowblower, but he's about ready to knock over a snow fort, a snow tower that his little sister made that has like Barbie dolls and Ken dolls in it, and she's at the window of the house like yelling like, no, knock my tower down. And so they're not evil at all. And fortune-telling is not. Well, fortune-telling, that's debatable. I don't believe divination is evil or there's anything wrong with it. There is divination all through the Bible, through the Old Testament and the New Testament. In fact, after Judas hanged himself, do you know what they used to select the next disciple?
I do not.
They casted lots. So basically they drew sticks or something, and that is how they decided the next disciple. I mean, we're talking the 12 disciples here, and if divination were so bad, they would have prayed and waited for a manifestation or waited for a voice from God or a burning bush. But no, they casted lots to pick the replacement disciple. I mean, come on, that is totally divination. And, same way with the Old Testament. I mean, the high priest used the Urim and the Thummim. We're not quite sure what that is. It was like this breastplate, and it had stones. We're not sure if they lit up or if it was a form of a yes or no or what have you. But, the high priest had the Urim and the Thummim on them, to help make decisions about war and judgments and what have you. And, of course, Daniel, he was a famous dream interpreter. He would look in a goblet and interpret dreams. And so divination is literally all through the Bible. So the tarot is just yet another tool to discern our soul's purpose, and to also be a co-creator with life or God, and to say, okay, what it is that I want to help co-create with life? Because we're given free will for a reason. And if you think about it, the act of creation means to initiate, to build, to act, or to produce. I mean, creation is not passive. It's not a subjective waiting game that unfolds. Creativity or co-creation implies acting upon something. An artist, in order to create a painting, he has to pick up the brushes, dip them in paint, apply them to the canvas. A writer, like myself, must use pen or pencil or pixels to put thoughts on paper to create something to be read. Or even a chef, he has to gather pots and pans, ingredients, and got to cook them on the stove in order to create a recipe that will be eaten. And our lives are really no different. We could throw up our hands and say, okay, things just happen, throw the free will to the winds of fate and just bracing ourselves for the next gust that's going to knock us on our butt. Or we can proactively live, seeing ourselves as co-creators with God or the universe or life itself, whatever you want to call it, and, start bringing the changes and enhancing our lives, according to our free will. And so basically, whether you're using tarot for divination, meaning you're shuffling randomly and say, okay, God or universe, what do you want me to know for today? And you draw it randomly, or you consciously look through the deck, like I'm advocating with Affect Your Reality with tarot cards, and you look through the cards to decide what you want to bring more into your life, you're still using your free will either way. And I think the big problem with getting tarot readings possibly or psychic readings is that people are so willing to give up their free will and check their brains at the door and using other people's pronouncements as the final word, instead of, let's say, seeing the results that come from a psychic or a tarot reader or what have you, and saying, okay, either I buy into this or not, And if I do buy into it, then how can I work with this energy of what the tarot reader saw or came up with, and how can I use that to bring it into my life? Or even having the common sense to say, you know what, this doesn't resonate, I'm totally not listening. Because you don't have to listen to what the tarot tells you in a tarot reading either. I always say, trust your own intuition, your own values, your own higher self, your own spirit, to make the final word on tarot.
I know we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth revisiting. When Scrooge saw the ghost of Jacob Marley and so forth, there was a line, something like, are these things that must be, or are they things that can be? In other words, when you see something in the tarot, and let's say it's something negative, like a health situation or something, is it something that is a fait accompli, or is it something that people can shape and change if they're aware of it and they take action?
Well, firstly, tarot readers have no business predicting health issues. It's against the law, number one. But number two, we are not qualified to do such things. But if you happen to be an MD and you're a tarot reader, okay, fine. But
well, thank you for that. I don't know that that's ever come up, and I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, technically, tarot readers have no business giving specific financial advice, medical advice, legal advice, because we are not qualified. Unless, of course, we are qualified, and then it's okay. But, that's why I have a real problem with fortune telling, because I differentiate fortune telling versus divination, because I think divination is asking your higher self or spirit or God or your soul, what it needs to know to enhance its life, or to remedy a situation, or to be proactive, or to bring something positive to a situation, or to find some resolution. Whereas fortune telling is basically, what are the winning lottery numbers, or, how's my legal case going to come out, or, fortune telling is more trying to be a control freak. It is trying to find out everything. Okay, what's the diagnosis going to be? What's my health problem? And I'm sorry, but tarot is not the vehicle for that. Go to your doctor, for crying out loud. I mean, that's what they're there for. They have diagnostic machines that can tell you, what's wrong with you. Don't ask tarot if you're pregnant. Go buy, a pregnancy test at the dollar store and test it yourself. I don't need to be a smart aleck, but, people sometimes consult tarot, especially these people who just are addicted to psychic lines, and they ask the silliest questions, and that's fortune telling. And that's, I'm more into helping empower people to make wise decisions. But to answer your question, I believe there are some things in life that are scripted, that we are on a rope that we can only go so far with. For example, I can affirm that I'm an Olympic athlete all I want, but there is no way in hell that is going to happen because it is not a part of my soul's journey. You know what I mean? The same way with other people. You can affirm that you are a millionaire, but are you really scripted to have that? And you might need to, consult your astrological chart to see that, or you might want to, do some really deep soul work and examine the archetypes in your life to know. So some things you can change and some things you can't. But I believe that wherever possible, if you want to try to improve a situation, there is nothing wrong with trying to do so. If you want to improve your health, there is nothing wrong with wanting to increase movement in your life and to eat more naturally, more fruits and vegetables, to take vitamins, to use holistic remedies as long as you're, consulting a qualified professional. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make more money for your family so you're more secure and so you can help others, and so you focus on some of the financial cards of tarot. And so, yes, we can affect our reality to an extent, but a good indicator of what you can't change is if you've repeatedly tried to change it into your life and it seems like it's a recurring theme, it's probably just a part of your soul's curriculum, and it's part of your life to present a challenge so that you can grow, and then you just deal with it as best you can and as constructive as you can. But when it comes to like our attitudes, we can absolutely change those. We can change whether we're optimistic or pessimistic. We can absolutely affect whether we see the best in people or the worst in people. We can absolutely, change whether we have gratitude practice and we're grateful and we focus on what's right with our life, or whether we focus on what's wrong. You know what I'm saying? So there are some things we can change and some things we can't, and so I say that if it appears that we can change them, there's nothing wrong with being co-creators with the universe, and gently and easily and with curiosity and hope and optimism, trying to change those things by inviting more of what is good and high vibrational in our life. But then there's some things, that we just cannot change, and that's okay, but we can change our attitude about them. There's a saying, you can't help the cards that life deals you, but you can help how you play the cards.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. An absolute lot of sense. I love what you said about, not being an Olympic athlete. It's like at this stage of life, well, it wouldn't have been if I'd been 18 or either. I'm not gonna make the NFL, but within the parameters that I have, I think there's a great deal that each one of us can do. I'm reminded, for a while I did a podcast and it never became super popular, but I was very proud of it, called Living Beyond Challenges. And I would interview people who had had some kind of physical challenge in their life, whether they were paraplegics or had gotten MS or things like that, and how they were inspirational and had done different great things. And the one that really sticks with me is there is a young man who creates these beautiful digital paintings. And the only thing he can move on his whole body is on his one hand. He has, I think, use of 3 or 4 fingers. And he creates these beautiful digital paintings, essentially. They're just gorgeous. And, he sells them in galleries and has art shows and everything. And he's very positive. And it's, rather than looking at the limitations we have in our own life, those of us who are in relatively good health and so forth, my goodness, we ought to look at it the other way around, of all the opportunities that we have. Not that, just because we can't be Warren Buffett or LeBron James or Tim Cook. Still, we have, right now, for example, doing what I do, being a content creator, there's never been a better time. Or like you are, an author, there's never been a better time because you decided you wanted to put this ebook out and you can do it. I think we ought to, and sometimes I have to remind myself of this too. I get down like everybody else, but we've got to look not at the limitations, but all of the possibilities we have.
Absolutely. And not only that, you, I am confident, are 100% on purpose with your soul. I don't know if you remember this, but one time you had me on and we were reading together and I drew the Emperor for you. And you were asking, am I ever going to be able to do this full time? And totally. And I said yes. And, just keep, being in control of your domain and doing your best. And you did it. And you're one of those people that I'm 100% confident that you are following your soul's purpose. And I would say, oh my God, what better life can you have than to be 100% fulfilling the soul purpose that you scripted before you incarnated? You know what I'm saying? I mean, then there's no need to compare yourself with others. There's no need to get down on yourself because you are confident that, oh my God, I am totally here on this earth, living the purpose that I was born to live, and it's perfect for me. And I think that's one of the drawbacks to social media, especially Instagram. People post these pictures, posed pictures, with no flaws and these pretty arrangements with flowers or candles or crystals or, perfect bodies, so to speak, or whatever. And, we look at those, and not me. I mean, I've opted out of that game a long time ago, but many people look at that and they start feeling down on themselves and feeling like they're less than. And then they start comparing themselves to this external yardstick instead of an internal one. And that's another cool thing about affecting reality with tarot cards and using tarot. You then create your own yardstick and your own benchmarks, your own indicators for personal success according to how you define it. You know, it keeps bringing you back to your own soul, What do I want? What will make me happy? You know, what is truly my soul purpose? What positive feelings can I enhance? And then you're focusing more on, not in a narcissistic way, but in a curious and saying, how can I bring my best self to this world? You know, how can I fulfill my self purpose? How can I affect others in a positive way? How can my legacy be a positive one where when I die, people are saying great things about me? And even if there's only just 5 people, you know, how have you affected the world, you know, in a positive way? Are you known as the person who would smile or offer, a kind word? Are you the person that is known as the whirlwind creator that was always making ebooks or always writing tarot books? Were you known as the very kind and fair-minded podcaster who blew our minds with, fascinating paranormal information? And that is the important thing. And so much, with social media, people are comparing themselves to these crazy realities that none of us are meant to have. Well, at least most of us are not meant to have. We're not meant to be NFL stars, or we're not being famous for being famous. We're not meant to, being Olympians, But maybe you have, you're good at playing football. Okay, so maybe you had an injury and you weren't able to go in the NFL. But guess what? Maybe you can play, football with your kids. Maybe you can coach a football team. Maybe you can write ebooks about football tips. Maybe, what I'm saying, there you can always take whatever your passion and your love is. And even if you experience a challenge in it or it's curtailed in some way, like the gentleman you were talking about, obviously he loved to paint and yet he only had a few fingers. Did that stop him? Heck no. And there's actually a card in tarot that I remind myself with. It's called the 5 of Coins or 5 of Pentacles. And it shows these 2 figures that are in the snow walking past what looks to be a church window. And one appears to be lame with a crutch. He has a bell on his neck, so it leads me to believe he has leprosy, which back then, to ring the bell would be, I'm a pariah, I'm a leper, stay away from me.
Right.
And so it's kind of a sad card, but it's also, a card for those of us who are able-bodied. And I always remind myself if I get tempted to whine, it could always be worse. It could always be worse. I consider that it can always be worse card. Yes, my drafty old house is eating up our fuel oil like you would not believe right now. But I have to remind myself, thank God we have the money to pay for the fuel oil.
Right.
Thank God my husband has a stable job and I make some residual income with my ebooks or tarot readings. Thank God we have warmth and tons of blankets. It could always be worse. And so, yeah, there's really no excuse for most of us for not creating a better reality for ourselves or even for other people, to go beyond our comfort zone and say, you know what, I could do a bit better here. I could either do a bit better in my attitude, or I could create something, or I could bring more joy or more light or more happiness or more peace to my relationships, to the world. There's always something we can do more of to make the world a better place.
Indeed. And Janet Boyer has been our guest. She does her part in making the world a better, more interesting place via tarot cards. So Janet,
thanks.
Janet, where can people find more information about everything you do and this new book, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards?
Oh, thank you. Before I do that, can I share my quick Janet's 10 Rules of Thumb for Greater Well-Being?
Sure.
They're very quick, and it's actually in my ebook, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards. And these have been guidelines of my life that I came up with, and I think this will help anybody. And so these are some rules of thumb when you want to intend to promote peace, clarity, joy, and well-being in your life. Number 1, look for what's going right in your life. Number 2, assume the best intentions of others. Number 3, keep your eyes on your own paper. Stop paying attention to what other people are doing. Number 4, take nothing personally, because what people say or do is more about them than you. Number 5, ask yourself how you can make a situation better. Number 6, question your thoughts and beliefs, asking, is this really true? Number 7, set your intentions towards a best-case scenario. Number 8, practice gratitude on a daily basis, or even keep a gratitude journal, what you're thankful for. Number 9, affirm whatever promotes understanding, peace, gentleness, and honesty. And number 10, intentions are like course corrections. You can always always change your direction. Whether it's the new year, middle of the year, end of the year, you can always change directions and change your intentions and what you're bringing into your life. And to answer your question, everything that I do, you can find at janetboyer.com. That's like my central hub. You can find all my books on there. You can find the decks that my husband and I create, our charm oracles. You can find reviews, everything at janetboyer.com or boyercreations.com. My ebook, Affect Your Reality with Tarot Cards, is on Kindle right now. Our coffee tarot deck is available on our site. So everything that we pretty much do, even links to my blogs and my social media contacts. I'm on everything. I'm on Pinterest, Google+, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. So janetboyer.com is the thing to remember, and people can find me, and feel free to email me. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to chat with you and answer your questions.
Sounds great. Our guest has been Janet Boyer, talking all about tarot. Janet, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me again, Jim.
Always a great time connecting with Janet and sharing her knowledge about the tarot. Always enjoy it and look forward to speaking with her again. And next up will be Judika Illes. She's going to talk to us about occult detectives right after this. The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by the Campfire Cruise. And guess who's going to be there? I'm going to be there. It's coming up July 30th to August 3rd, 2018, departing from Miami. And I think you're going to have a good time if you're a fan of the shows. And I think that you'll absolutely love it. Mike and Wendy over at Holiday Maker Travel, they've done quite a few of these different cruises and different themes over the last few years. UFOs, ancient mysteries, and now the paranormal. And I was lucky enough to be on my first one with them last year. And they really do a great job of breaking down the barriers between the cruisers and the speakers. And in this case, me, because I loved the last cruise I did because I really got to interact with our listeners, with our cruisers. We're in a private group, so there's not outsiders impinging on our discussions or our meals. We'll have meals together. We'll break bread together. And it's just such a great time. And I do consider those folks I cruised with last time. We started out where they were listeners and now they're friends. Now, this is perfect for fans of the shows, whether you're single, a couple, or a family, because there is truly something to do for everyone. Now, here is the exciting news, and I really didn't understand the extent of this, but the ship, Royal Caribbean's Mariner of the Seas, the ship is currently undergoing a $100 million reimagining. It's a talk of the cruise industry, with all new family fun and more. Basically, Royal Caribbean surveyed cruisers about what they wanted in a shorter cruise, a 3 or 4 night cruise, and they've rebuilt the Mariner to those specs. And guess what? We'll be one of the first groups on this basically new ship that everyone is going to want to cruise on, and you're going to be one of the first if you join us. Now, get this. If you're a fan of the show, this is going to be fun because as we depart from Miami, we're going to start off the cruise with a meet and greet private cocktail reception with me and the other cruisers exclusive to our group. Nobody else. And the thing that they do at Holiday Maker Travel, they include exclusive private shore excursions that are not available on board, exclusive to our group, and you'll be able to join me as we visit Fort Montague. Built in 1741, it was made of local limestone, and it's the oldest fort still standing on the island of New Providence at the eastern end of Nassau Harbor along the waterfront. We'll go on to Fort Fincastle. Take a few minutes to ascend the 66 limestone steps of the Queen's Staircase, named in honor of Queen Victoria. And we'll end our tour with a tasty brew or two at Pirate Republic Brewing Company, the first and only craft brewery in the Bahamas. I mean, how cool is that? We'll also visit Royal Caribbean's private island, Coco Key, with tons of fun for everyone, including the adults and the little ones and the beautiful beach. Great stuff. Not to mention, I will be recording a live podcast at sea, a live campfire podcast at sea, and you can be a part of that, but only if you want to. Now, the special group price includes the 4-night cruise, port charges, the shore excursions, cocktail party, and more. And don't forget, this is still a cruise vacation, and it includes all the great things you'd expect: meals, entertainment, activities. But the folks at Holiday Maker Travel, well, they add something very, very special, and they do a great job of handling all the little details. So there's only one thing to do. You've got to book your spot. And it's really important because we're making a decision in the next week or so on the cruise if we're going to move forward with it. So if you're interested, now is the time to speak up. Now is the time to raise your hand. Make your reservations now. Go to campfirecruise.com to be a part of my upcoming Campfire Cruise. Or better yet, you can call them at 877-642-4308. That's 877-642-4308 to get any of your questions answered. It's all put on by our friends Mike and Wendy over at Holiday Maker Travel, and they always do such a great job. They're great people too. And you can go to campfirecruise.com and find out all about it and get on board. Campfirecruise.com to sail with me on the Campfire Cruise. I think you'll love it. Make sure you do it right away, though. We need to know now. Thanks, Holiday Maker Travel. Well, today we're going to talk about something quite different, but I think it's really neat. Now, I'm a big fan of mysteries and sleuths and all of those things. Also, I've always had a great fascination, thus my career in doing these podcasts the last 12 years, in the occult. Now, what if you took those two and put them together? I think that would be a pretty fascinating book. Well, actually, someone has, and that someone is on the line. I'm talking about Judika Illes. She is a leading authority on magic, mysticism, and the occult, as well as a lover of mysteries and detective stories. She is the editor of the Wiser Book of the Fantastic and Forgotten, and author of numerous books devoted to the magical arts. Judika, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
So I guess what was the inspiration? What was the germ of the idea behind this? Because I think it's a great one.
Actually, this book was born in its predecessor. I had edited a previous book of vintage esoteric fiction called The Wiser Book of the Fantastic and Forgotten. And I love old esoteric fiction. I just, I've read it pretty much as long as I've been reading. And as I was, I chose the stories for both these books. And as I was choosing the stories for the other one, and there are 2 occult detective stories in that book, but I hadn't realized how many occult detective stories there were. And there were 2 in there, and when I hit a third story, which is the story The Cave of the Echoes by Helena Blavatsky, which is in this book, Occult Detectives, it struck me that these stories really deserved a book of their own. And then I started just reserving them. There's tons of these stories. I could do another 5 of these books easily, all with, different stories and all wonderful stories. It's a huge, huge genre. People really love modern occult detectives. Often they don't know the term. It's something people love without knowing they love it. All the fans of the X-Files and Supernatural and Twin Peaks and even Scooby-Doo. And they don't realize that 100 years ago, there were fictional depictions that often are very, very visual. As you read them, you can really see it as if it was a movie. And they're just these fabulous, fabulous stories.
So for your purposes, when you say occult detectives, how do you define that?
Well, a detective is somebody, who investigates and detects. And the most famous detectives are Sherlock Holmes, for example, or Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple. An occult detective, and sometimes they're called psychic detectives or supernatural detectives, there has to be an element of the paranormal or the esoteric in there somewhere. It's a very fluid genre. It's kind of a big, sprawling genre. Sometimes you just have regular detectives who find themselves investigating something that is more than mundane, or at least appears to be more than mundane. There's always a Scooby-Doo formula, where you have the kids and they're investigating what looks like a ghost, and it always turns out just to be plain old human greed. But that would still count, because it at least, even if the end result is not paranormal, there is an element in there. Sometimes it's a genuine ghost story. Sometimes, or a vampire story, or, all kinds of stories, sometimes it's a mundane crime, but it's the detective who has the paranormal skills. A couple of the detectives in this book, one of them is a clairvoyant. She has visions of what happens. There's Morris Claw, the dream detective, who dreams solutions to mostly not paranormal crimes, although the exception is in this book. There's a detective who solves crimes through psychometry, meaning that he is able to touch an object and gain information from that object through his power of touch. And so, what distinguishes the occult detectives is that there is that element of the paranormal. For a long time, as I wrote the introduction to the book, this is considered the bottom of the bin for detective fiction, because for those who don't take the paranormal seriously, it was just perceived as laziness on the part of the author. They didn't bother coming up with a good plot. They just came up with, some supernatural occurrence that would solve the whole crime. But I think that in the 21st century, we're able to reappraise those stories and understand what some of these authors, and some of these authors wrote these stories just to make a buck, and others were among the most influential occultists of all time.
That's
and
exactly you preempted or premeditated my question. Is like how many of these people say, "Hey, let's write something like this because it will sell," or others who had a true belief or a true involvement in the occult?
It's true. They're all represented. There are some authors here who just really, needed to sell a story and it was popular. The stories in this particular book they're all good stories. So even, I don't know if they're occultists, but I think most of the people had an interest in the paranormal at least. One of the stories is the Horse of the Invisible was written by the man who Houdini accused of, playing fast and loose with the handcuffs. But he was interested enough to have been involved with that. And then you have stories written by Dion Fortune and Helena Blavatsky, who, Helena Blavatsky is the founder of Theosophy, and, the first to introduce the concepts of karma and reincarnation and all these Asian philosophies to the West. And Dion Fortune, member of the Golden Dawn, and Algernon Blackwood also, who has a story in here, who ended up creating her own society, but is among the most pivotal figures of the modern occult revival of the 20th century. These are people who knew what they were talking about.
Why? You mentioned something interesting. You talked about the X-Files and so forth.
Yeah.
And then you said, these are quite old stories. Why do you think there's a timeless nature, not only to the occult, but to fictional stories surrounding the occult? Why are we so fascinated, and why were people 100 and 200 and 300 and 1,000 years ago so fascinated?
And 2,000 and 5,000.
Yes,
absolutely.
exactly. Yeah.
I am better known. These books are really a delight for me to do, but they're a departure for me because what I am most known for are my books of nonfiction. I write about witchcraft and magic spells and, the history of the cult. And I believe that what fascinates me is the commonalities between people. And I think that if you dropped a human being virtually any place on earth, what we have in common as people, what would we find to talk about that we share in common? Ghost stories. I think that's something that fascinates people of all time, everywhere on earth. We may have different interpretations. We may understand things differently, but I think everybody likes a creepy story, or maybe doesn't enjoy a creepy story, but has a reaction to a creepy story. I think that's how we're wired as people. And then there, to get metaphysical, there is the sacred nature of storytelling, which I talk about, I talk about more in the introduction to the other book, because in this one I really wanted to explain, I wanted to talk about occult detectives. This is a much more specific book. It focuses on something very specific. Every story, features an occult detective in it. But the concept of, we haven't been, if you think about the history of humanity, I follow on Twitter somebody who is an expert in the Ice Age. And this person is always showing us art or, little sculptures from 20,000 years ago. And, and they're beautiful. And they're recognizably human works. We have been literate for actually a very short period, as far as we know, a short period of our existence. The power of the word, the power of storytelling on so many levels, on a social level, on an enjoyment level, but I think also on a magical level. It's a very, very profound thing.
Now, one thing I want to address and ask, because I'm sure it's a question you get all the time, and I've heard various people address it, and I'm guessing I know how you'll address it, but the reason I'm asking the question is I want your point of view, not someone else's.
Yeah.
The word occult. If someone is, quote, uninitiated, they may feel, ooh, that's dangerous. In fact, I think a lot of people, I'll just come out and say it, I think when people see the word occult, there's a certain percentage of the population says Satanist.
Yes. Who think it's a creepy word.
Yeah.
It's a creepy, scary word. Well, but
hidden knowledge, right?
Well, it just means hidden. English is my second language. I did not, my parents were Hungarian immigrants, and I had to learn English, and I became an English major, and I love the English language, but it was something I really had to work at. And so when to this day, if I see an unfamiliar word, I look in the dictionary because I want to know what it means. And I'm always surprised at how often people are just sort of careless with language, or language, some different words carry baggage, and occult is a word with a lot of baggage. But really, all it means is hidden. The occult, it's hidden knowledge. It's knowledge that's not obvious. And certainly there may be harmful occult knowledge, but there's also a lot of positive and benevolent. It's a pretty neutral word. So an occult detective is somebody who delves into the mysteries. When it's not the things that are not obvious, the things that are mysterious, they may be very natural, but they're not run-of-the-mill. I opened the book with a quote from The Secret History of Twin Peaks by Mark Frost, which I love, and it took me a long time. I was looking for a quote to open the book with forever, and I couldn't find one I liked, and then this one just sort of popped out at me at the last minute. It said, the quote is, "A wise man once told me that mystery is the most essential ingredient of life for the following reason. Mystery creates wonder, which leads to curiosity, which in turn provides the ground for our desire to understand who and what we truly are." And that's the occult right there in a nutshell. And so these occult detectives, they want to, what's really going on here, even if it turns out to be the unmasked, greedy banker or real estate agent from Scooby-Doo. We want to know the truth. What is, Fox Mulder? I want to believe. What's out there. And that's really at the heart of the occult. It's people assume when you say occult, you're talking about, Satanism or devil worship or, something, and it's not. It's just delving into those mysteries. I mean, it could be, but it's not, but it doesn't have to be.
Now, I hate to ask you this because I think it's one of the most unfair questions you hear from someone, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Which one's your favorite? What story is your favorite?
Oh God, I don't know. It varies. There is an I chose the stories, and it was hard because you only have so much page space, and there are some wonderful stories that I would have liked to get in here, and there wasn't enough room. I can probably go through all these stories and tell you why I love them. The very first story, The Pot of Tulips, by an author named James O'Brien. It's the oldest story in here. It's from 1855, and I'm incredibly fond of this story because James O'Brien died during the Civil War. So this story was published in 1855, probably written a little bit earlier. I was born in New York City, and I have, when I had corporate jobs, I was always working in Midtown Manhattan. I know that area so well, like the back of my hand. And this story talks about that area when it was country. He's rented a country house on 40th Street. And to me, it's just such a mind-blowing, and there's this beautiful garden, it's now a very overgrown garden. And I know exactly what the area that he's talking about, and it's that aspect of time traveling, of seeing it through those eyes. It's really not that long ago, but it's like another world, and I love that story. Even if it wasn't an excellent occult detective story just for the scenario, I love that story. There's, I hate to say there's not a bad story in here, but there isn't, but I think that's probably my very favorite. That one's especially dear to my heart for personal reasons.
I know that you said there were so many to choose from. What were the criteria for picking the ones you picked?
Well, there are sort of positive and negative aspects. There had to be an occult detective. I tried not to repeat them. Some of these occult detectives, the occult detective in The Pot of Tulips is a young man named Harry Escott, and he features in two great stories. There's another Harry Escott story, and some of them feature in series, and some of them are standalones. But I wanted to give a broad spectrum, so I didn't want to repeat them. I wanted to make sure that some women detectives and some women authors were represented, because I just, that was important to me to show the spectrum of authors, and there are. And, the other side of it, the stories, I say the negative side, the stories that I chose not to. There are some stories that have good aspects to them. This book, I intended it to be enjoyed. It's not an academic book. It's not, my thesis on occult detectives. These are really good, fun stories, and I wanted people to be able to pick them up and enjoy them. And unfortunately, a lot of stories at that time, it was very acceptable for, to have a lot of stereotyping, racism, misogyny, homophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-everything. And sometimes as you're reading a story, it's kind of like a slap in the face, and I didn't want that. So I eliminated those stories.
No, that makes sense.
I didn't want readers to have my experience where you're reading the story and you're having a great time for the first 5 pages, and then all of a sudden you're kind of stabbed in the heart. So, I eliminated those. And, if you go looking for these authors, and, it's very prevalent. It's hard to sometimes do that because it was just very, very acceptable at that time.
How are these books generally, or not books, but these stories in the time of their writing, how were they generally released to the public?
Originally in magazines. Most of them were in magazines. And so the way this book is structured, there's an introduction. Then there are 13 stories, and in front of each of the stories, I have a little intro to the specific story, where I tell you something about the author. Did they write this for the money? Were they genuinely, interested in the topic? Something about the occult detective, and whether there are more stories featuring this detective. Most of them were serialized in magazines, and the more popular ones then ended up in books. For example, the the Sheridan Liffin news stories featuring Dr. Heselius. The example about a story that's too long is the famous story featuring Dr. Heselius is Carmilla, which is a very famous vampire story. He's not in it that much, but that's and it's a beautiful story, and I would have like to include it, but it's really not a story, it's a novella. And I mean, we wouldn't have been able to fit, more than 3 or 4 stories in the book in that case. So Green Tea has a monkey demon, and I love that story also. I love the tea and the monkey demon and that whole story. But that was quite a successful story, and it, was published in a book, and you can buy the entire book, and some of these are like that also. And then some of these, like The Cave of the Echoes by Helena Blavatsky, she claimed it was a true story. She wrote different versions of it for both English language and Russian language magazines. There are different versions floating around, some, possibly more embellished than others. I think she published them partly because she needed the money. I think a lot of people find the thought of Helena Blavatsky, co-founder of Theosophy, she has, after she died, a series of her stories that she had written, to make that book, a much needed book in her case. It was sold afterwards as Nightmare Tales. And I think a lot of people think that's very undignified. But, some of them are really good stories, including this one.
Probably the most famous author in here is Sir Conan Doyle, but not only was he the creator of Sherlock Holmes, he was also had a legitimate interest in spiritualism, didn't he?
He had a very deep interest in spiritualism, which actually led to his falling out with Harry Houdini. His wife, Arthur Conan Doyle's wife, was a medium. He was very frustrated by Sherlock Holmes. I mean, ironically, Sherlock Holmes is the series that he wrote for money, but it is what he's most famous for. And I love the Sherlock Holmes stories. I have, there is a small Sherlock Holmes museum up in the Hudson Valley that when it closed, I bought a bookcase. So, I have it in my home. I think he's wonderful. But he really wanted to be known as a serious spiritual author. And this story in here features a detective named Lionel Dacre, and it's based on a true story. It's based on a story that sparked some witch hunts in France that led up to into the king's household.
Now, these are works of fiction. However, sometimes in works of fiction, great truths can come out and great insight can come out. Do you think that's the case with any of these stories?
Oh yeah, and in some case, even though they're works of fiction, they were fiction out of frustration. And I'm not looking at the introduction, and I don't want to give you the wrong year, but until the repeal of the last Witchcraft Act in the UK, and many of these stories are from British authors, I couldn't publish my books. I couldn't write my books, nor could my publishers publish them. You were forbidden, pain of law, to publish anything that could be interpreted as promoting witchcraft practices. And so the way to get around that was to write a novel. You could write a fictional, you could write a story, you could write a novel, and you would just slip little bits of information in there that would go over. It's like watching The Simpsons with children. They don't catch a lot of the references. There's a lot of things in there that only an adult would catch, but the kids can enjoy it anyway. And so, very similar. I think particularly the Dion Fortune story, The Return of the Ritual, Helena Blavatsky. Even though this is an entertainment and hers is kind of a spooky story, it's an anonymous shaman comes and solves a long unsolved murder. But there's things in there that if you have the curiosity to learn about these things. There's some genuine, valid practices in there. And, if you just want to enjoy it as a story, you can.
So, what do you hope that readers will take away from this book? An interest in the occult, an interest in these authors, all of the above?
I guess all of the above, but I hope they enjoy the stories. I think people should read more. I think people should read more in general. I think that there's a lot of old literature, that are just treasures. And, I think people will read it in, whatever fulfills your own needs. I didn't write this as exclusively for, only for the witchcraft crowd. This is a book that can really be read by anyone. I mean, I think, also, middle schoolers, high schoolers. I mean, there's, it's just good literature. But I also, what was important for me was to treat the stories with respect. Because as I was saying earlier, they haven't been treated with respect as mysteries. They haven't been, even people who love these stories often kind of mock them. They love them because they perceive them as goofy. Oh, look, she's solving a mystery by palmistry. I try to treat them with respect. However the reader enjoys it is up to the reader. But I thought they were deserving of respect and the same kind of attention, as a Raymond Chandler book would be getting now, for example, who, once upon a time was also not treated with respect.
A very good point. Well, Judika is talking about psychic sleuths and the detectives of the unknown in this book. It is the Wiser Book of Occult Detectives. 13, I've got to believe that was intentional, 13 stories of supernatural sleuthing. Judika, where can people find the book and also find more information on everything that you do?
Oh, well, the book is easy. The book can be found really wherever fine books are sold. And if you've got an independent retailer who doesn't have it on their shelves, you can ask them to get it for you through the publisher. It's not a hard thing to do, and should not cost you anything extra. I can be found online. I am on Facebook. I am on Twitter. I have a sadly neglected website I have to get back to. It's my name, JUDIKAILLES.com. But Twitter and Facebook are really good places to find me.
Our guest has been Judika Illes. The book is The Wiser Book of Occult Detectives, 13 Stories of Supernatural Sleuthing. Judika, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me on the Paranormal Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. I know I certainly did. If you like what we do here, you may want to check out my Paranormal Plus Club over at jimharoldplus.com. And that's where you can get access to over 1,400 podcasts that you can't get on the free feeds. And people seem to love it. We have a great sale going on right now for the first 100 people who sign up and use the coupon code Winter 17. That is Winter, the number 1 and the number 7. They get their first month for only $2.95. We think that's a dandy deal. You can find it at jimharoldplus.com. That's jimharoldplus.com. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. And please tell a friend. Bye-bye, everybody. Now for the legal disclaimer. We do not accept money from publishers or content producers in exchange for interviews. However, as with most media outlets, in the majority of cases, we do receive complimentary copies of books and DVDs that we feature on our podcasts. Your purchases of books, DVDs, and other items via our Amazon.com links benefit Jim Harold and jimharold.com and help us continue our programming. The sponsor messages you hear on the programs are paid endorsements, although we really do like them. For the full disclaimer, go to jimharold.com, and thanks for listening.